All have wanted to be here because our United Kingdom is a beacon of openness and generosity. And all, in turn, have contributed magnificently to the amazing story of the UK. Today, that proud history of safe and legal migration is ultimately responsible for many of those working in our hospitals and on the front line of our response to the pandemic, for more than 60% of the England football team at the final of Euro 2020, for many of our country's leading figures in the worlds of business, art and culture. And I'm pleased to say, for ever-growing numbers of people serving in public life, including colleagues of mine, like Nadeem Zahawi, who escaped with his family from Saddam Hussein's Iraq, Dominic Raab, whose Jewish father came to Britain from Czechoslovakia to escape Nazi Germany, and Priti Patel, whose family fled persecution in Uganda. So I'm proud that this government has continued the great British tradition of providing sanctuary to those in need. In fact, doing more to resettle vulnerable people in the UK through safe and legal routes than any other government in recent history. Since 2015, we've offered a place to over 185,000 men, women, and children seeking refuge, more than the entire population of Sunderland, and more than any other similar resettlement schemes in Europe. This includes almost 100,000 British nationals overseas threatened by draconian security laws in Hong Kong, 20,000 through our Syrian scheme, 13,000 from Afghanistan and to whom we owe debts of honour, and around 50,000 Ukrainians. And we're not only supporting British nationals and those settled in the UK to bring potentially hundreds of thousands to their extended family from Ukraine, we're also welcoming unlimited numbers of refugees from that conflict as the British people open their homes in one of the biggest movements of refugees to this country that we've ever known. And as we work with local authorities and the devolved administrations to welcome those coming from Ukraine into our communities, we will also find accommodation across our whole UK for all those who have come here previously but who are currently in hotels. Because it makes absolutely no sense for the taxpayer to foot those bills running to almost £5 million a day, with the sum total of those we accommodate being concentrated in just a third of local authorities. It is controlled immigration through safe and legal routes which enables us to make generous offers of sanctuary while managing the inevitable pressures on our public services, such that we can give all those who come here the support they need to rebuild their lives, to integrate and to thrive. But the quid pro quo for this generosity is that we cannot sustain a parallel illegal system. Our compassion may be infinite, but our capacity to help people is not. We can't ask the British taxpayer to write a blank cheque to cover the costs of anyone who might want to come and live here. Uncontrolled immigration creates unmanageable demands on our NHS and on our welfare state. It overstretches our local schools, our housing and public transport, and creates unsustainable pressure to build on precious green spaces. Nor is it fair on those who are seeking to come here legally if others can bypass the system. It's a striking fact that around 7 out of 10 of those arriving in small boats last year were men under 40, paying people smugglers to queue jump and taking up our capacity to help genuine women and child refugees. This is particularly perverse as those attempting crossings are not directly fleeing imminent peril, as is the intended purpose of the asylum system. They've passed through manifestly safe countries, including many in Europe, where they could and should have claimed asylum. It is this rank unfairness of a system that can be exploited by gangs which risks eroding public support for the whole concept of asylum. The British people voted several times to control our borders, not to close them, but to control them. So just as Brexit allowed us to take back control of legal immigration by replacing free movement with our points-based system, we're also taking back control of illegal immigration with a long-term plan for asylum in this country. It is a plan that will ensure the UK has a world-leading asylum offer, providing generous protection to those directly fleeing the worst of humanity by settling thousands of people every year through safe and legal routes. And I emphasize this. So whether you're fleeing Putin or Assad, our aim is that you should not need to turn to the people smugglers or any other kind of illegal option. But to deliver that, we must first ensure that the only route to asylum in the UK is a safe and legal one, and that those who try to jump the queue or abuse our system will find no automatic path to settlement in our country, but rather be swiftly and humanely removed to a safe third country or their country of origin. And the most tragic of all forms of illegal migration, which we must end with this approach, is the barbaric trade in human misery conducted by the people smugglers in the Channel. Before Christmas, 27 people drowned, and in the weeks ahead, there could be many more losing their lives at sea and whose bodies may never be recovered. Around 600 came across the Channel yesterday. In just a few weeks, this could again reach 1,000 a day. I accept that these people, whether they're 600 or 1,000, are in search of a better life, the opportunities that the United Kingdom provides, and the hope of a fresh start. But it is these hopes, those dreams, that have been exploited. These vile people smugglers are abusing the vulnerable and turning the Channel into a watery graveyard, with men, women and children drowning in unseaworthy boats and suffocating in refrigerated lorries. And even if they do make it here, we know only too well some of the horrendous stories of exploitation over the years, from the nail bars of East London to the cocklebeds of Morecambe Bay, as illegal migration makes people more vulnerable to the brutal abuse of ruthless gangs. So, we must halt this appalling trade and defeat the people smugglers. That's why we're passing the Nationality and Borders Bill, which allows us for the first time to distinguish between people coming here legally and illegally. And for this distinction to affect how your asylum claim progresses and your status in the UK if that claim is successful. It will enable us to issue visa penalties against those countries that refuse to accept returns of foreign criminals and failed asylum seekers. It will clean up the abuse of our legal system, introducing a one-stop shop that will end the cycle of last-minute and vexatious claims and appeals that so often thwart and delay removals. And it will end the absurd practice of asylum-seeking adults claiming to be children to strengthen their claims and access better services. Crucially, it will also allow us to prosecute those who arrive illegally with life sentences for anyone piloting the boats, and to identify, intercept, and investigate these boats. From today, the Royal Navy will take over operational command from Border Force in the Channel, taking primacy for our operational response at sea, in line with many of our international partners, with the aim that no boat makes it to the UK undetected. This will be supported by £50 million of new funding for new boats, aerial surveillance and military personnel, in addition to the existing task force of patrol vessels, Wildcat helicopters, search and rescue aircraft, drones and remotely piloted aircraft. This will send a clear message to those piloting the boats If you risk other people's lives in the Channel, you risk spending your own life in prison. People who do make it to the UK will be taken not to hotels at vast public expense, rather they will be housed in accommodation centres like those in Greece, with the first of these to open shortly. At the same time, we are expanding our immigration detention facilities to assist with the removal of those with no right to remain in the UK. We're investing over £500 million in those efforts, and this is on top of overhauling our arrivals infrastructure here in Kent, with new processing facilities now operational at Western Jetfoil and at Manston. But we will need to go further in breaking the business model of these gangs. So from today, our new migration and economic development partnership will mean that anyone entering the UK illegally, as well as those who have arrived illegally since January the 1st, may now be relocated to Rwanda. This innovative approach, driven by our shared humanitarian impulse and made possible by Brexit freedoms, will provide safe and legal routes for asylum while disrupting the business model of the gangs. Because it means that economic migrants taking advantage of the asylum system will not get to stay in the UK, while those in genuine need will be properly protected, including with access to legal services on arrival in Rwanda, and given the opportunity to build a new life in that dynamic country, supported by the funding we are providing. The deal we've done is uncapped, and Rwanda will have the capacity to resettle tens of thousands of people in the years ahead. And let's be clear, Rwanda is one of the safest countries in the world, globally recognized for its record on welcoming and integrating migrants. Later this year, it will welcome leaders from across the Commonwealth. And before the pandemic, in 2018, the IMF said Rwanda was the world's fourth fastest growing economy. We're confident that our new migration partnership is fully compliant with our international legal obligations. But nevertheless, we expect this will be challenged in the courts. And if this country is seen as a soft touch for illegal migration by some of our partners, it is precisely because we have such a formidable army of politically motivated lawyers who for years have made it their business to thwart removals and frustrate the government. So I know that this system will not take effect overnight, but I promise that we will do whatever it takes to deliver this new approach. Initially within the limits of the existing legal and constitutional frameworks, but also prepared to explore any and all further legal reforms which may be necessary. Because this problem has bedeviled our country for too long and caused far too much human suffering and tragedy. And this is the government that refuses to duck the difficult decisions. This is the government that makes the big calls, and I profoundly believe there is simply no other option. And I say to those who would criticize our plan today, well, we have a plan. What is your alternative? Now, I know there are some who believe we should just turn these boats back at sea. But after much study and consultation, including with Border Force, the police, National Crime Agency, and military maritime experts, to whom, by the way, I pay tribute for all the incredible work that they do dealing with this problem as things stand, it's clear that there are extremely limited circumstances when you can safely do this in the English Channel. And it doesn't help that this approach, I don't think, would be supported by our French partners. And I've got to say to you that relying solely on this course of action is simply not practical in my view. And I know, of course, that there are others who would say we should just negotiate a deal with France and the EU. and we've made repeated and generous offers to our French friends, and we will continue to press them and the EU for the comprehensive returns agreement that would solve this problem. We remain grateful to the gendarmes on the beach for the joint intelligence work and the cooperation that has stopped thousands of boats. We would like to deepen that work, and we continue to believe that a deal with France and the EU is in the national interests of all our countries. But we must have our own framework for full sovereignty over our borders, and we must find a way to stop these boats now, not lose thousands more lives while waiting for a deal that just doesn't exist. And I know that there will be a vocal minority who will think that these measures are draconian and lacking in compassion. And I simply don't agree. There is no humanity or compassion in allowing desperate and innocent people to have their dreams of a better life exploited by ruthless gangs as they're taken to their deaths in unseaworthy boats. And there's no humanity or compassion in endlessly condemning the people smugglers, but then time and again ducking the big calls needed to break the business model of the gangs and stop these boats from coming. And there's no humanity or compassion in calling for unlimited, safe and legal routes, offering the false hope of asylum in the UK to anyone who wants it, because that is just unsustainable. There are currently 80 million displaced people in the world, many in failed states where governments can't meet their aspirations. In an era of mobile connectivity, they are a call or a text away from potentially being swept up in the tide of people smuggling. The answer cannot be for the UK to become the haven for all of them. That's a call for open borders by the back door, a political argument masquerading as a humanitarian policy. Those in favour of this approach should be honest about it and argue for it openly. We reject it, as the British people have consistently rejected it at the ballot box, in favour of controlled immigration. We simply cannot have a policy of saying anyone who wants to live here can do so. We've got to be able to control who comes into this country and the terms on which they remain. And we must do this in the spirit of our history of providing refuge. And in that way, we can more than play our part in offering sanctuary to thousands fleeing persecution. But then, of course, other countries must play their part too. And that's what I think is most exciting about the partnership we've agreed with Rwanda today, because we believe it will become a new international standard in addressing the challenges of global migration and people smuggling. So I'm grateful for Rwanda's leadership and partnership, and we stand ready to work with other nations on similar agreements, as well as wider reforms to the international asylum framework. As I say, we will continue to work with our French friends to tackle the gangs. We will continue to lead cooperation with crime and intelligence partners across Europe. We will continue to seek a returns agreement with the EU or with France. But in the meantime, and for the foreseeable future, we need this new approach. The people smugglers are undermining confidence in our borders. They are betraying all those who do the right thing, who try to come here legally through forms of migration or the safe and legal routes provided for refuge. They're undermining the natural compassion and goodwill that people have towards refugees in this country, and they are endangering human life day after day. And though the way ahead will be hard, and though we can expect many challenges and many obstacles to be thrown up against this plan, I believe this plan is the right way forward, because the people smugglers must be stopped in order to save countless lives, and because tackling illegal migration is precisely the way to sustain a safe, legal, and generous offer of sanctuary to those in need. And that is in the very best traditions of this country and the values we stand for in the world. Thank you all very much indeed. I'm now going to go to the media for some questions. I'm going to go first to Nick Eardley of the BBC.
Thanks, Prime Minister. Is the plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda a genuine answer? Is it a workable solution? Or is it an attempt to look tough on an issue which the government's failed to address in the last few years? And if I can ask about the fine you received earlier this week, do you still think you have the moral authority to govern? What would you say to the people watching at home who think that you have been guilty of hypocrisy for not following the rules you told them they must follow? And what would you say to the MPs who think you lied to them?
Well, thanks very much, Nick. And look, on your second point, I said quite a lot about this on, I think it was Tuesday. I'll be saying more when I update Parliament, as you can imagine, next week. And I think you probably have to wait until then for me to say more on that. But on whether this is a solution that is a magic bullet, as it were, that can deal with the problem of illegal migration across the Channel, I want to be absolutely clear with everybody. I think that this is necessary, but it is, of course, not sufficient. There are many other things that we need to get right. We need to make sure that our legal framework is capable of dealing with the problem, as well as the practical steps that we can take. But none of the reforms to our laws will really be any good without the basic ability to get in the heads of the people smugglers and make them understand that the deal they're offering their poor, vulnerable clients is not one that stacks up. And it's to get into the heads of the people who are coming across the Channel, risking their lives in this way, that they're much, much better off going for the safe and legal routes that we have, rather than paying to jump the queue and to risk their lives. Because if they go that way, if they come across the Channel illegally in these vessels, then they risk, as I've explained, ending up not in the UK but in Rwanda. And that is something that I believe will, over time, prove a very considerable deterrent. But there are several things that you've got to get right in addition to that policy, not least the legal framework. Because I've got no doubt at all that this will be challenged, and there will be a long way to go. But it's an indispensable component of the solution. Anushka Astana, ITV.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Prime Minister, the people you're talking about say they are fleeing persecution, and they often come from countries where there are no safe routes here in the UK. Why are you sending them with one-way tickets to a country where there are reports of ill treatment and torture in detention centres, and that your own government criticised last year for failing to investigate these alleged human rights violations? And a quick question, because I'm not patient enough to wait, so I hope you will answer it. But on Tuesday, you've admitted that you unknowingly misled Parliament. I just want to understand if you're going to put the record straight.
Yeah. Thanks. So on the second point, again, Anushka, forgive me, you're going to have to wait until I come to Parliament. Of course, I will set the record straight in any way that I can. But on the your point about safe and legal routes, I just think it's crucial for people to understand that the UK is very, very generous, and we should be proud as a country of what we do to welcome people. 185,000 just in the last few years. And it's not just the people who came under op pitting from Afghanistan. We're opening our arms to more. What we're doing with the Ukrainian scheme is two uncapped systems of looking after people coming from Ukraine. This is a country that is built on successful immigration by safe and legal routes. But what we're trying to do is to buttress that, to shore it up in people's imaginations, to make sure that people believe in it and trust our immigration system by cracking down on the illegal approach and on the people smuggling. And I just want to say something about Rwanda, because I think there's a risk of stereotyping here. And Rwanda is totally transformed over the last few decades. It's a very, very different country from what it was. And we are making sure that we have a very, very high degree of confidence about the way people will be received in Rwanda. We're today publishing a long memorandum of understanding between the UK and Rwanda about how they will be received and treated. And this is not something that we have put together overnight. This has been 9 months in preparation. So I would just urge people, not to think in a blinkered way about Rwanda. There will be, I think that this is the prototype of a solution to the problems of global migration flows that is likely to be adopted by other countries. I know that there are other European countries that are already in similar discussions, not just with Rwanda, but others. Billions of people are going to be moving across the face of the planet. We need sensible partnerships to address those flows. Theo Usherwood of LBC.
Prime Minister, last year more than 28,000 migrants crossed the Channel. Is your aim to bring that number down, and what will you do if this policy fails to do that? And just on Partygate, you told the Commons on December the 8th that it goes without saying that if the rules were broken, and then there will be disciplinary action for all those involved. When you go to Parliament next week and you speak to MPs and you're in the House of Commons, will you detail what that disciplinary action is that you've imposed on those who work for you and indeed yourself?
Thanks, Theo. I can certainly tell you that I will be updating, as I said to Anushka and to Nick, I'll be updating Parliament on all that next week. But on your first point about the numbers, look, you're right. The numbers were high last year, but this year they're going to be even higher. There's no doubt about it. I mean, they're already just in the first few months of this year. They're higher than they were over the comparable period last year. They're growing. This is the people smugglers are now becoming very adept. They're getting their boats, these frail things that you'll have seen. They're getting them in huge numbers. It looks as though they're being manufactured to order in China. They have a whole system going now, and we need in a humane and compassionate way to interrupt their business model. They're making, I think Dan told me, what, 350,000 euros a boat, something like that. This is a lucrative trade for them. It is an evil trade, and it's undermining people's confidence in safe and legal migration. We need to emphasise the safe and legal routes and undermine what the people smugglers are doing. And I just want to be absolutely frank with people, Theo. This is not something, or this is, I think, the deal that we're doing with Rwanda is an essential part of the solution, but it is not the total solution. It is a part of it is one of several steps that we're taking to beat the problem. John Stevens, Daily Mail.
Hi, thank you, Prime Minister. Can I just clarify, is it your aim to bring the numbers crossing the Channel illegally eventually down to zero? And on your relationship with Rishi Sunak, is he in danger of being moved as Chancellor, or can you say today that he's got that job for as long as he wants it?
Yeah, sorry. So yes to the second, and yes to, I think, to the first. Obviously, we do want to make sure that I'd like to get it down to zero. I think everybody in this room would like to get it down to zero. I think people in this room do an absolutely heroic job, and it's incredibly difficult to get the balance right and to be firm, but also to be humane and compassionate to people, very, very vulnerable people who are, doing something that is extremely brave and extremely dangerous, and which they shouldn't be doing. What we want to show people is that this is not only dangerous, but also likely to end in failure for you, that you're taking the wrong step, that there is a better solution, and you should wait and go via the safe and legal route and not fall victim to the people smugglers. That's what we're trying to do. Aubrey Allegretti from The Guardian.
Thank you, Prime Minister. On top of the concerns about the human rights record of Rwanda, where people who'll be fleeing to the UK might obviously be sent because they're facing persecution at home, there's also a cost element. One estimate puts it at £2 million per person per year, and a Conservative MP, Andrew Mitchell, has suggested it would be cheaper to put people up at the Ritz instead. So are you comfortable with the cost element of the plan? And on the party situation you faced, why do we have to wait another week? Can you tell us whether or not you're going to rule out resigning, whether you faced 1, 2, 3 or more fines? Thank you.
Okay, so Aubrey, second question, I redirect you to what I said earlier on. I'm afraid that that won't give you any particular surprise. I said quite a lot about this on earlier in the week. I think I should wait till Parliament gets back to update Parliament fully. And on your point about cost, look, what's happening already? The asylum system is already costing this country £1.5 billion a year. The hotel costs are now £5 million a day. You talk about the Ritz. They're now £5 million a day, and it's climbing. And unless we can beat the business model of the gangs, I'm afraid it will continue to climb. And what we need to put in place is the deterrent system that will change their minds, make them see that they've made the wrong deal and that there's a better path for them if they really want to come to the UK. And that's what we're doing today. Last question to Jonathan Riley of The Sun.
Prime Minister, can you guarantee to the British people that under your premiership there will be no more small boats? And secondly, the Home Secretary is in Kigali today. Would she not be better off being in Paris, speaking to the French officials there and prioritising a bilateral deal with France to stop this? And are you confident that post-French elections that deal will be struck? Thank you.
Look, I think that's really, Jonathan. I think that is the most important issue that you've touched on, and I think it's the issue that's uppermost in everybody's minds because who studied this problem. And so, can I guarantee that we're going to get rid of the small boats problem? No, obviously not. I think that what we can hope to do is to demolish the business model and greatly to deter those who come here. But to say that we're going to get down to zero anytime soon is unlikely. And what we're proposing today is, I think, certainly a radical plan, but it will take a while to come fully and properly into effect. But I just want to say on France and on Paris, Priti and many other ministers have been continually in Paris over the last couple of years, trying to negotiate a returns agreement, trying to sort this problem out. And it has been disappointing and frustrating that we've been unable to do that. The French say it needs to be done at an EU level. That hasn't been negotiable either. In my view, and the view of many people who studied this, there is more that could be done to intercept people at the French side. There is more that could be done on the beaches in France and now in Belgium as well. But we're not here to try to find fault with anybody else today. Today is about the UK coming up with its own solution in the absence of a proper agreement with France. And that's what we're doing, and we'll continue to work with. I mean, a lot of the cooperation with the French is excellent. We just think it could go further, and there's more to do. I think that'd be probably a fair summary of it. But in the meantime, before we get that, what we need to do is have a more radical solution that enables us, as the UK, to offer our own package and to undermine the business case of the people traffickers, and that's what we're doing. That's the purpose of this whole package: the military primacy, the new reception centres, and the new migration and economic partnership deal with Rwanda. That's what we're trying to do. I'm not going to pretend it will work overnight, but I do believe that in time, this is the best way forward. It's the morally right thing to do. It's the humane and the compassionate thing to do as well, because we cannot have people continuing to die at sea, paying huge sums to evil people traffickers who are simply exploiting their hopes and their ambitions. We need to encourage them to take the safe and legal route if they want to come to this country. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you.
That was the Prime Minister speaking live in Kent, saying his new policy to stem illegal immigration was the humane and compassionate thing to do, because he says they need to stop these vile people smugglers who are exploiting the hopes and dreams of people that want to come to the UK. Clearly, the headline there is that from now on, people who arrive illegally will be swiftly and safely removed to a third country or their country of origin. The Prime Minister just said that country is Rwanda. He said the people that do make it here in the meantime will be housed in accommodation centres, not hotels, and those that will be removed to Rwanda won't be just from today onwards, but from those that have arrived since the 1st of January illegally. He also said that life sentences will be brought in for the captain of the ships that are doing the people smuggling, and that from now on, operational control of enforcing the rules in the English Channel will be handed over from the Border Force to the Royal Navy. Quite a few significant headlines on this new policy that has been hastily announced today coming out of that. And the Prime Minister, perhaps because of the hasty nature of the announcement, said that he does not expect it to come into force immediately. He does expect it to be challenged in the courts. He's prepared to do whatever it takes in order to deliver it. We've got reaction from all corners now. Our political correspondent, Rob Powell, Sky's Madeleine Ratcliffe, who's in Dover, and Ashna Hurinag, who's in Sanguet, on the site of a refugee camp outside the French port of Calais. Let's get reaction from all sides. Rob Powell, first of all, in Westminster. Perhaps to focus on the fact that the Prime Minister is announcing this very significant new policy, but says it's not going to come into play overnight. He expects it to be challenged in the courts.
Yeah, this is an extraordinarily tricky issue to try and find a solution to, and Home Office officials and various parts of government have been working on this for months, if not years now. And I think there was an acknowledgement of that, albeit a tacit one, in what the Prime Minister was saying there, saying that there is simply no other option when he was talking about that decision to send people that arrive via boats illegally into the UK to Rwanda, essentially an admission that all of the other options that have been looked at really haven't worked, because what we've seen Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, do in recent months is try to come to some sort of agreement with France, paying money to the French and helping them with patrolling the coast to try and stop people making that journey. That really hasn't worked. We've seen hundreds of people arriving still in just one day this week. We've seen them the government potentially look at turning boats back in the channel. But you heard the Prime Minister say in that speech that was not practical. In fact, you had Border Force officials saying at the time that they would be hesitant to do it. And I think what the Prime Minister is trying to do is sort of frame this as the humane, compassionate option that allows more people to come through safe and legal routes. I think the danger is, and I think it was illustrated very visually from what you're seeing on your screen right now, as the Prime Minister was laying out this sort of new eye-catching plan to send people to Rwanda, we were seeing pictures of an official in Dover carrying a child onto land from a ship who had presumably been rescued in the channel. Now, this morning there was a suggestion that actually it would only be single men that would be part of this new processing system to go out to Rwanda. That was rowed back on a little bit by the Home Office after that, saying that it was speculation. So we wait to go through the detail. I've just seen an email drop into my inbox with the detail now. We're likely to get more from the Home Secretary in Rwanda as well in the coming hour. But really, the Rwanda aspect of this is sort of just one piece of this big asylum overhaul. It's the most eye-catching piece, which is probably why the government have sent the Home Secretary out to Rwanda to promote it, because, frankly, in the run-up to local elections and under pressure on other fronts, it's in the government's interest to prompt a fierce debate about this issue, because they believe anyway that politically many voters are on their side in terms of taking a tough approach towards this. But the other elements that are coming as part of legislation, which still hasn't received royal assent, I think the amendments, the changes that the Lords and the Commons are making are still being considered, will make other very big changes to the asylum system as well, requiring asylum seekers to put all of their information down in what's called a sort of one-stop shop applications, which reduces their right to appeal. That will likely be challenged in the courts. There is also new changes in the law as well, which mean that the route in which you come into the country influences how you're treated. Obviously, most obviously, that if you come in on a small boat, then you could be sent to Rwanda in order to encourage what they say is safe and legal route. But that, lawyers have said, could be against the Refugee Convention as well. So that might be challenged in the court as well. So this is all incredibly, incredibly tricky. I think that it's in the government's interest, as I say, to have this debate. And I think what we heard from the Prime Minister there is the political point that will be made from Conservatives to Labour criticism of this, which is quite simply, what is your alternative?
Rob, thank you very much. And as you said, I'm sure we'll be speaking to you a little later again when we do hear more from the Home Secretary. As we heard moments ago, the Prime Minister has warned that the number of people risking their lives in the Channel is set to soar over the summer. Around 600 people crossed the Channel to arrive in the UK just yesterday, and the government says the daily figure could rise to 1,000 in just a few weeks. More than 28,000 people reached the UK in small boats in 2021, and at least 44 people, including 3 children, died trying to cross the Channel to the UK. Let's go live now to Sky's Madeleine Ratcliffe in Dover. Ashna Hurinag, who's in Sanguet, the site of a refugee camp just outside the French port of Calais, is with us as well. And Madeleine, to you first of all, I mean, we just mentioned that, of course, the numbers could soar over the coming days. I'm sure you're witnessing some of those things over the last couple of days down there in Dover. One also wonders whether announcing a policy before it's likely to take effect that's aiming at deterring migrants from making these journeys would, in fact, spur them in the short term.
Yes, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because while the Prime Minister was talking, we were watching dozens and dozens of migrants who had been brought in on a border force patrol vessel being escorted off the boat and onto the land to be taken away for processing in a bus. And the idea, according to Boris Johnson, is that anyone who came in after January this year will be sent to Rwanda, so these people as well. And he put a lot of focus on the fact that these were young men under 40, and certainly we have seen plenty of them. There have been 2 boats that have come in so far this morning. One, this border force vessel, which had quite a lot of people, and a smaller boat from the lifeguard, which only had about 20 people. But while there have been a lot of young men, there were children on there as well. We saw several children being carried ashore, wrapped up in blankets. They weren't walking themselves. And, you know, everyone there had been given their life jackets, their blankets, the masks, and we think rescued from the sea. So the idea that there's still a lot yet we don't know about how this will work, which of those people, how will they decide who's eligible and who's not, because there seems to be some uncertainty about who will be sent to Rwanda. But the idea is that the people who were coming ashore just as the Prime Minister was speaking this morning could be taken to Rwanda. And it's certainly, it has been quite a nice morning today. We have seen quite a lot of people coming because the conditions have been good. Flats, calm seas, it's been sunny. But just in the last few minutes, very heavy cloud has come in behind me, completely reducing visibility. So you could set off from Calais thinking you've got the best day you could, giving yourself the best chance to get across safely. And by the time you get to the Dover Cliffs, it's not at all the same. It's very dangerous. And certainly it's incredibly dangerous no matter what the weather when you're in these tiny boats, which really aren't seaworthy. They're dinghies often. We saw a border force vessel pulling behind it some of the recovered dinghies it had found, and they just look like toys. They're so small and inappropriate, clearly, for people making this crossing, especially when you see them next to the proper boats in the harbour. But despite that, the weather does seem to be encouraging more people. We've now, with that 600 people who crossed yesterday, the Prime Minister confirmed, that takes us to more than 5,000 this year. We didn't get to that stage till June last year. So it gives you a sense of how many more people are crossing. About 4 times as many crossed in March this year as they did last year. So people clearly are desperate and are trying to come across no matter the risks.
Addy, thank you. Let's cross the Channel now. And Ashna, who's in France. Ashna, the Prime Minister said during his comments there that he accepts that these migrants are in search of a better life, but the vile people smugglers are exploiting their hopes and dreams and turning the Channel into a watery human graveyard. I imagine where you are based, it's witnessing some of the people who purely have those hopes and dreams and are searching for a better life?
They really are, and there are countless people here waiting for, indeed, searching for that better life. They're looking across, and on a clear day, behind me, I know it is quite misty, but on a clear day you can see the white cliffs of Dover, and you can start to imagine and build a new future in your life. For many people who have fled persecution, as many of the journalists put to the Prime Minister, and fled war zones, including a number that we've spoken to today at a camp just down the road in Dunkirk. We spoke to a group of Afghani men, aged between about 17 to 18, some in their 20s, and they'd fled, they said, to war zones. Not only had they come from Afghanistan in August when the Taliban regained power, they fled that country and crossed the borders of Iran and crossed into Turkey. They then made their way into Ukraine. And then, as we know, that 2 weeks ago, nearly a month ago now, once again they found themselves in a war zone. They managed to gain visas in Ukraine, hence why they were there and they were working there. And they fled that war zone and made their way here to northern France, where they are desperately trying again and again to board one of those inflatable dinghies. But we spoke to one of them who didn't have any idea of this news. Of course, news isn't the priority, I suppose, when you're looking forward to getting on a boat and trying desperately to risk your life in that way. But when we told them of this announcement, they were exasperated. They said this felt brutally unfair. They'd been looking at the way at which other refugees have been treated. They referenced the fact that refugees fleeing Ukraine had been held in high regard. They've been new schemes set up purely for them. They felt frustrated and they felt as though they were being ignored, and they were so incredibly desperate for help. And they said, why, when they have fled through countries in the Middle East and then tried to make their way to here and then to the UK, why would they then be sent to East Africa? They couldn't understand it. And these aren't just young men, of course, but we are talking about women and children too. But we did just happen to speak to this group of young men who said that, yes, they tried to board a boat yesterday, they will try again tonight, and truthfully, they will keep trying. But there's something else that the Prime Minister picked upon there. He spoke of the talks that have been happening with France, and we know that over a number of years, this isn't a new issue, is it? The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has been going over, meeting her French counterpart here in Paris and in other cities in northern France, and that's been for herself to see the way that these businesses are operating, and they are very much businesses, people smugglers profiting hugely from this. And there was some criticism from the Prime Minister there, saying that talks had been disappointing, saying that things needed to move much further, and this he saw it as a last resort. But when we spoke to the French Interior Minister last year, they very much said that they are at capacity. They are trying their best. 24 hours, not often 24 hours, but around the clock. There is surveillance here. Their hardware is improved. They've got binoculars. They've got reinforced aerial surveillance. Just a moment ago, the police came down to check this particular beach, and up above, we've heard the Coast Guard helicopter too. So both sides are saying that they are doing as much as they can. Crucially, though, what this scheme is all about is about clamping down on the people who are profiting from it. As I mentioned, those people smugglers, people have paid thousands of pounds for a place on one of those dinghies, wearing those life jackets, and at dawn you will see them on beaches like this trying their luck, trying to get to the other side. And this new measure, this idea of moving people for processing their settlement applications, moving them to Rwanda, putting that to people here, the asylum seekers here, that's really not going to deter them.
Ashna, thank you very much for that. John Vine, who was the UK's first independent Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration, joins me now to discuss this further. John, many questions. My first is the one that I guess takes operational effect immediately, which is that the Royal Navy is now in charge of operations in the Channel rather than the Border Force. What is your take on that?
Well, I think that was flagged up some time ago, that was going to happen. I mean, this whole new idea, this new model, is based on what happened in Australia between 2012 and 2015. That was Operation Sovereign Borders, that's what it was called. And the military took charge of the straits between Papua New Guinea the northern coast of Australia, and they turned back boats, and they also interred people into parts of Papua New Guinea and also a small country called Nauru. And so this is a model which has been tried before, and to be fair, it did succeed in its aim of actually stopping boats coming and depositing migrants on the shores of Northern Australia. But it was tremendously controversial from a human rights and refugee and asylum point of view. And listening to the Prime Minister's speech today, he flagged up several times that it would be hard going, and there'll be a lot of challenges to this. And I think it's going to need a great deal of political resolve.
So with that in mind, does it surprise you that the announcement has come before sorting out some of those issues, or is that to be expected?
No, I think what they needed to do was to come up with a plan to avoid what happened last year, which was very reactive. Bearing in mind that 3 times as many migrants reached our shores in this irregular way last year compared with the year before. And I think what the Home Office and the government can see is this is only going to get worse this year, much, much worse. And so this is basically a preemptive strike to try and deter people from handing over large sums of money to people smugglers and risking their lives in coming to Britain in this way. And it remains to be seen whether that's going to work in this context. It's going to be subject to a lot of challenge, though, on human rights grounds, and people will be looking at the way it's implemented. You know, how do you get lots of people onto planes and fly them 4,000 miles away to Central Africa? You know, what's that going to look like? What's the optics going to be around that? What happened in Australia sometimes is that, you know, there was disorder, and there was people self-harming in the camps in Papua New Guinea. And so there were lots of issues around the rights of individuals and the way that they were treated in camps. So people will be looking to see how this is going to be operated, and the detail, of course, which we don't really have yet, will be poured over, I'm sure.
John, we heard the Prime Minister asked a couple of times there whether he would be better served trying once again to strike better deals, more effective deals with the French and the EU more broadly. Is that advisable, and who bears responsibility ultimately for that big increase that you mentioned in number of small boat crossings from France just last year, which of course did arrive the first year of Brexit?
Well, the bottom line is that there has been cooperation on the ground with the French authorities. I'm sure the police forces and border force officials are working effectively together on the ground. But you have to realise that we're talking about hundreds of miles of French coastline. And it's virtually impossible to have law enforcement present on all the occasions when organised crime are sort of floating people in inadequate vessels and pushing them out towards the coast of the UK. And so there's only so much you can do in terms of enforcement. What the Home Office is trying to do now is attack the business model. You know, people are handing over large sums of money to organised crime with a sort of a guarantee that they're going to get to the UK. And the government's saying, well, you're not going to get to the UK. And the Prime Minister used the word deterrence quite a lot in his presentation. This is about saying, look, it's not worth it, don't bother trying. So we'll have to see whether, in fact, that works.
And John, putting just momentarily to one side the moral question here that you've already raised, the human rights question, which is obviously incredibly important. But if we were just to put that to one side, in your position as an expert on borders and immigration, do you think this policy will work and get these crossings down significantly?
Well, it did work in Australia in terms of reducing the number of boats that came to Australia illegally. So in terms of that short-term aim, it will probably have an impact, but it depends on rigorous enforcement. But it'll also be challenged legally. And the legislation, which is the Nationality and Borders Bill, is still making its passage through Parliament. It's not yet received royal assent. And, you know, there are a lot of powers that the government's proposing in that legislation that haven't yet been agreed by Parliament. And so there will be pushbacks in legal terms, and people will be looking to the way, you know, these migrants and asylum seekers are treated. So there's a lot of devil in the detail, which we know little about at the moment.
John, thanks so much for joining me. John Vine, the UK's first independent Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration. We're going to stay on this story, of course, now, and our political correspondent, Rob Powell in Westminster, able to join me once again. And Rob, you have some fresh updates on this developing story.
Yeah, we've been starting to get some of the detail through about how practically this policy and this partnership deal that's been signed with Rwanda will work. Now, the Home Office says that it will apply to anyone who, and I'm quoting now, makes dangerous, illegal or unnecessary journeys. So that would include people that arrive in boats, in dinghies, as we've been seeing this morning. It would also include people that arrive in lorries coming through the Channel Tunnel, for example, as well. Crucially, and in contrast to some of the briefing or on-the-record comments, really, from Cabinet Ministers this morning, there is no indication that this will just apply to single men. It says that this may apply anyway to everyone. So I think we read into that potentially men, women, children, families could be sent to Rwanda to have their asylum claims processed if they are deemed to have arrived in the UK through a dangerous, illegal or unnecessary route. So what will happen essentially is that this will apply to people backdated to January. So some of the people that we've seen arriving on the Kent coast today may well be notified even in the coming weeks that they are being taken to Rwanda. The first flights are expected to take off to take people to Rwanda in the coming months as well. So we've got a degree of timescale. In terms of practically what will happen when people are picked up now by, of course, the Navy, which is taking primacy on managing this in the Channel, is that they will be processed on the Kent coast and then taken to a separate centre a bit further inland at Manston in Kent. And from there, we don't necessarily have a sort of timescale between arrival and being taken to Rwanda, but from there, there will be decisions made and then they may be notified that they are to be taken to Rwanda. Now, once they arrive at the processing centre in Rwanda, that is where the asylum claim will be considered. If the asylum claim is deemed as successful and legitimate, then they will get refugee status in Rwanda. And so they will get a 5-year package of training and support to, as the government puts it, form a new life in Rwanda. If their claim is unsuccessful, then they will either be taken back to their country of origin, or they may be taken to another eligible country, or crucially as well, they may be given a different type of immigration status in Rwanda as well. So that's the one part of it. The second part of this is the government setting out what it wants to do to, as they say anyway, curb the extortionate cost of asylum seekers that are currently being housed in hotels across the country. Part of this will mean the transformation of an old RAF base in Linton on Ouse into a refugee holding centre. So some of the people that have come before January that are still in hotels when they wait for their claim to be considered will be taken here. So the emphasis, I think, very much being put on deterrence. The hope of the Rwanda part of this policy, I think, will be ultimately that they don't need to use it too much, because if there is that sort of threat that you won't be able to stay in the UK, then fewer people will try to make the journey, and ultimately people smugglers won't be able to take them across or charge people the extortionate sums to take them across the Channel. I guess the proof of this is going to be, firstly, in how many people are actually transferred to Rwanda and how successful that is in terms of resettling people there. How expensive it is. We were just hearing from the previous guest that the policy in Australia worked in terms of discouraging people from making the journey, but it was also absolutely extortionately expensive. So there's the practical policy aspects of that, and then there are, of course, the ethical aspects of it as well. In what happened in Australia, we have heard of suicides, of murders, of other instances of abuse that have gone on in some of these resettlement camps as well. This all comes, though, I think, as one part of a wider overhaul that the government is trying to do on the asylum system. And I think, as I say, the political argument that they will be making around this, and I don't think they mind having this argument today, as fierce as it may be, is that they have a plan, they have something they think will work, and people that are criticising it should put forward an alternative. But I think one very, very legitimate, crucial point to make is that the government is putting emphasis on safe and legal routes into the UK. Well, when you talk to refugee charities and lawyers, they say there simply aren't enough of those safe and legal routes. So it's all very well saying you can't come in boats or on the back of lorries anymore, and that won't work. You've got to do the safe and legal routes. But that's not really a sort of humane point to make, if you like, if the safe and legal routes simply aren't there and simply can't be practically accessed by people fleeing war who may be, or are, in fact, in one of the most vulnerable points of their life.
Rob Powell in Westminster for us. Thank you very much. Now, the government's plans to fly asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing is an attempt to tackle the rising number of small boat crossings in the Channel. Offshoring the process will change the system in the UK, but will potentially also affect the situation on the French coast, where the boats tend to leave from. I'm joined now by French MEP and member of the Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs, Fabienne Keller. Very good to see you, Madam Keller. Thanks for joining me this morning. What is the French reaction to this new policy just announced by Prime Minister Boris Johnson?
Actually, it's a shock. UK is applying the Geneva Convention. And this means that all asylum seekers, all migrants asking for protection needs to have a proposal made to them to check their file if they can remain or not. And if they cannot, have a swift, correct, human return to their country of origin. And as you know, we have many people on the French coast expecting to rejoin UK, not willing at all to apply for asylum in the rest of Europe, but in UK itself. And the idea of sending them with the army, on boats of the army, to Rwanda is really a terrible proposal.
The Prime Minister did mention there that a very high percentage, we don't know exactly, of those seeking asylum in the UK via this route crossing this channel have come from safe countries, from countries like France, and that they could alternatively seek asylum there, that they're not being persecuted from their final port of disembarkation, if you like. What is your view on that?
2 points. The first, when UK was part of Europe, the Dublin rule was in application. That means that it was possible to ask the member state, the European member state, where the migrant entered, to take him charge. It's called take charge, and to examine his asylum demand. As Great Britain left the European Union, this rule is not anymore applicable. That's a factual point. Second point, a lot of people who are staying on the French coast have family in the UK, have relationships. They know why they don't apply in Europe but want to join the UK. And it's not respecting international convention. It's not a human way to do it by sending them in another country, which is not at all their own country, where they maybe lived before. It's a false answer to a real problem we share in all European countries, but it's more in discussions with the French, but also the Belgian, as proposed by the European Union, then that we can find a human solution for this question and respect the Geneva Convention. That's very important. We have to protect all the people in the world who are asking for protection. I must say that it's a very strange situation at a time where Europe is welcoming 4 million refugees from Ukraine. And as you may know, Great Britain is taking a very small share of this. Only thousands of people could join UK to be protected.
I totally understand your point on that and the numbers. Just to go back to the Dublin rule you mentioned, that rule may legally no longer apply, but morally, does that also mean that France has no responsibility to those people seeking asylum because they ultimately... Excuse me, actually, Madame Keller, maybe you can stick around and we can discuss things a little bit further, but we're going to travel now to Rwanda and listen to the Home Secretary.
Let me start by welcoming the Home Secretary, her team, and members of the UK press to Rwanda for the launch of this new partnership. Together, Rwanda and the United Kingdom have developed a truly unique approach to address the global migration crisis. This migration and economic development partnership reflects Rwanda's commitment to protecting vulnerable people, a principle which always governs the international policy of our government. It will also address a serious equity issue, which is the global imbalance in opportunities for human capacity development, which is driving irregular migration. Because of Rwanda's recent history, we have a deep connection to the plight of those seeking safety and opportunity in a new land. As you may be aware, Rwanda was formerly one of the world's leading producers of refugees, and many Rwandans have experienced what it means to be displaced. This has shaped how we approach migration and asylum. Rwanda already provides a refuge for almost 130,000 refugees from multiple countries, including neighbors like the DRC and Burundi, as well as Afghanistan and migrants evacuated from Libya. This work has involved partnering with international bodies such as the UNHCR, the International Organization for Migration, and the African Union. And we remain open to continue working with these and other organizations on this new program. For there to be meaningful long-term solutions to the migration crisis, which is causing huge suffering to millions, we need to do more than just give shelter. It is possible to frame migration in another way, and it is an opportunity for all societies to thrive. Fear and suspicion of those who need to move to build a better life makes it harder for all of us to better work out win-win solutions for all. Migrants make social, cultural, and economic contributions to societies in which they integrate. We believe that Africans and others from elsewhere should be able to live safe, dignified lives in Africa and should not be locked out of opportunity. This is why we need to work with partners on bold new approaches which tackle the root causes of irregular migration while providing immediate safety and opportunity to those currently in need. Madam Home Secretary, this is why Rwanda is pleased to work with the UK on this partnership. By relocating migrants to Rwanda, investing in their personal development and providing education, employment, and other opportunities, we are giving them the chance to make new lives in our country as full members of our communities. This will not only help them, but it will benefit Rwanda and Rwandans and help to advance our own development. And for those who don't wish to make Rwanda their new home, they will be facilitated to return to their country of origin or settle in other receiving countries. We believe this partnership with the UK offers a unique and innovative approach that will provide a safe haven and opportunity to those in need, and be the first crucial step towards a more effective and humane global migration system. We look forward to partnering with the UK on this exciting program. I thank you all and welcome the Home Secretary to make her remarks before we take a few questions from the media. Madam Home Secretary, the floor is yours.
Minister. Thank you so much. And thank you for your incredibly warm welcome, certainly to my delegation and our colleagues from the UK media as well. I'm delighted to be here in Kigali alongside our friend and partner, Minister Dr. Vincent Biruta. And I just would like to express my personal thanks in particular to him and his team for the constructive way in which we have been working over many, many months to achieve and deliver this partnership. The United Kingdom has a long and proud development history with Rwanda, and our shared interests have resulted in a strong economic and development growth, lifting millions out of poverty, but also resulting in growing manufacturing and technology sectors, which are generating jobs and sustainable growth for generations to come. Now, I know at first hand that your country, Minister, is a regional and international leader. You are on the global stage, very much yourself more often than not, but also hosting the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, the World Telecommunications Development Conference and the Sustainable Energy for All Forum. Your national leadership is the African voice on international initiatives, which really speaks to seeking to find solutions to regional and international challenges. And I'm very honoured to be here, and the UK is delighted to be working ever more closely with Rwanda. We have many, many interests in common, and we face many of the same challenges. And I want to turn to one of those challenges now. The global migration crisis and how we tackle illegal migration requires new world-leading solutions. There are an estimated 80 million people displaced in the world, and the global approach to asylum and migration is broken. Evil people smugglers and their criminal gangs are facilitating people into Europe, resulting in the loss of life and huge costs to the UK taxpayer. The tragic loss of life of people in the Channel and in the Mediterranean at the hands of these evil people smugglers must stop. And today, our approach as two outward-looking countries has led to the signing of a new international partnership, which is a world first. It is a migration and economic development partnership with the country of Rwanda and the UK. This will see some of those arriving illegally in the UK, such as those crossing the Channel in dangerous small boats, relocated to Rwanda to resettle and to rebuild their lives in the way in which the Minister has just outlined. More than 28,000 migrants crossed the Channel last year by small boat in very dangerous and perilous conditions. The UK asylum system is collapsing under a combination of real humanitarian crises and evil people smugglers profiteering by exploiting the system for their own gains. Criminals are exploiting the hopes and fears of migrants, pushing them to making dangerous journeys to the UK with fictitious and false promises that they can settle in the UK if they make it. And this has devastating consequences for the countless men, women and children who have tragically lost their lives or loved ones on perilous journeys. It is also deeply unfair because it advantages those with the means to pay smugglers over the vulnerable who cannot. Global systems and conventions have failed to address this global crisis, and the world has changed, and renewed global leadership is required to find new innovative solutions to this growing problem. Today, the United Kingdom and Rwanda have signed a joint new migration and economic development partnership to put an end to this deadly trade in people smuggling. This is part of the United Kingdom's new plan for immigration to control our borders, protect our communities, stop dangerous illegal migration, help the world's most desperate people, and welcome international talents to the UK. It is the biggest overhaul of our immigration system in decades, underpinned by a Nationality and Borders Bill, which will soon become law. Our country, the United Kingdom, has always extended the hand of friendship to those in need. And in recent years alone, we have proudly welcomed tens of thousands of refugees from Syria, Afghanistan, Ukraine, and BNOs from Hong Kong, Rwanda has one of the strongest records for refugee resettlement. And in recent years, as the Minister has just said, Rwanda has resettled over 130,000 refugees. It has an established record of welcoming and integrating people, such as those from the Democratic Republic of Congo and Burundi, but also including, for example, people from Libya evacuated under the EU's emergency transit mechanism in partnership with the UN Refugee Agency and the African Union. Rwanda is also a state party to the 1951 UN Refugee Convention and the 7 core principles of the UN Human Rights Convention. Border control is fundamental to national sovereignty. Uncontrolled immigration reduces our capability and capacity to help those who need our support. It puts intolerable pressures on public services and on local communities. And at home, as the Prime Minister has said today, because the capacity of the asylum system is not unlimited, the presence of economic migrants, which these illegal routes introduce into the asylum system, inhibits our ability to support others in genuine need of protection. The British people are fair and generous when it comes to helping those in need. But the persistent circumventing of our laws and immigration rules and the reality of a system that is open to gaming and criminal exploitation has eroded public support for Britain's asylum system and those that genuinely need access to it. Putting evil people smugglers out of business is a moral imperative. It requires us to use every tool at our disposal and also to find new solutions. That is why today's Migration and Economic Development Partnership with Rwanda is a major milestone. It is also very much in keeping with our vision for global Britain that harnesses the potential for new relationships and stimulates investments and jobs in partner countries. Working together, the United Kingdom and Rwanda will help make the immigration system fairer, ensure that people are safe and enjoy new opportunities to flourish. We have agreed that people who enter the UK illegally will be considered for relocation to Rwanda to have their asylum claims decided. And those who are resettled will be given the support, including up to 5 years of training with the help of integration, accommodation, healthcare, so that they can resettle and thrive. This agreement fully complies with all international and national law. And as part of this groundbreaking agreement, the UK is making a substantial investment in the economic development of Rwanda. This will support programmes to improve the lives of people in Rwanda and develop the country, the economy, job prospects and opportunities. In addition, the UK will provide funding and expertise to implement this agreement. As I have said many, many times, this is a global issue, with many countries struggling to address the challenges and the causes, and there is no single or simple solution. This agreement illustrates that we can no longer accept the status quo. People are dying, and the global migration crisis requires new ways to find new partnerships and to find new solutions. It will also deal a major blow to the evil people smugglers. We know that this will not be easy. We know that we will face challenges along the way, but together with the Nationality and Borders Bill and the new plan for immigration, the UK will support those fleeing oppression and persecution and tyranny through safe and legal routes, while controlling our borders and deterring illegal entry. Our world-leading Migration and Economic Development Partnership is a global first, and it will change the way we collectively tackle illegal migration through new, innovative and world-leading solutions. Thank you.
And I work with the New Times in Rwanda. Honourable Minister Biruta, my question is, how has Rwanda's previous experience in welcoming, in hosting, in integrating refugees and asylum seekers informed this decision on the part of the government of Rwanda? And Madam Secretary, my question is, how did you arrive at the decision to pick Rwanda to be your partner in this process? What factors did you look at? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I think I mentioned something about this in my remarks when I said that Rwanda is already hosting more than 130,000 refugees from countries like Burundi, like DRC, or even Afghanistan. And I also said that our people here in Rwanda, a good number of them have, in their previous lives, faced these challenges of being displaced, being refugees or asylum seekers. So all these, this experience has informed the government of Rwanda to be convinced that we should do something about this problem of irregular migration. There will be one way to look at this problem. One would be to just look at it and be indifferent. The other one will be to try new solutions because the problem is there. You have good principles in place, but they are not working. So as a government, we thought that we need eventually to partner with the UK, among others, to do something about the existing problem. So our history, our past has informed our decision to work with the UK on innovative solutions to the migration crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. James, thank you for your question. And you've asked how did we reach the conclusion to partner with Rwanda. And as the Minister has said, this is very much, number one, a partnership. And clearly we engage in dialogue, and we have been for over 9 months now. But Rwanda has a very unique history in terms of refugees and resettlement in particular. First and foremost, Rwanda is a safe and secure country with the respect for the rule of law. And clearly, a range of institutions that have evolved and developed over time. And with that, the skilled way in which Rwanda has already provided resettlement for almost 130,000 refugees from multiple countries. And look at that alongside many of the good innovations that have taken place, along with some of the investments, the economic development, the fundamental principle of respecting human capital and investing in people. If I may say so, Rwanda has been very forward-leaning and has been very dynamic in the conversations that we've had as well around, yes, economic growth and the partnership, but respect for people and giving them the ability to find new opportunities, but effectively restart their lives, rebuild careers potentially, and settle here successfully.
Shigi Marike from Sky News. Australia have set up their own offshore processing system, and there are reports of self-harming and even people taking their own lives because these people are going through tremendously difficult times with their mental health, and they've made difficult journeys. I wanted to just ask, how will you ensure the well-being of asylum seekers sent to Rwanda? Do you see that as a UK government's responsibility, or are you passing the buck to the Rwandan government on this? And I also wanted to ask a question of the Rwandan Minister Biruta. There's a massive backlog of cases to get through when it comes to UK asylum claims. You could be welcoming thousands of people here. How are you going to ensure you have the infrastructure to make sure that works?
Thank you very much. So first of all, let me just say, this is a partnership. This is a partnership between our two countries, first and foremost. This isn't a one-sided deal, so I just want to absolutely deconstruct any myths around that. We have been working together. In fact, I actually just want to pay tribute to our teams because it's our officials that for 9 months, over 9 months, in fact, that have been working on a lot of detail. And when we publish our MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, you will see the detail, how much work has taken place in terms of being fair and having the right processes to respect people that come here to Rwanda to resettle. Australia is not comparable. This is not the type of arrangement that Australia had. Australia, as a sovereign country, obviously had its own arrangement. It is fair to say our teams have been working through facilities here. You've heard me mention in my opening remarks as well the technical experience that we are bringing. We believe in investing in Rwanda. We're very open about that. We believe that's the right thing to do. Yes, on the economic development side, but also on the migration partnership. We, as two ministers, stand here today absolutely committed to changing some of the norms around the broken global migration system. Because for too long, other countries, and by the way, naysayers, just sit on their hands and have been watching people die. So we have the right processes in place, we have the right mechanisms for scrutiny, the checks and balances. That is incredibly important. And you heard me say in my remarks as well about respect of rule of law, but importantly as well, national and international laws and conventions.
So in relation to the infrastructure aspect of the program, when we were discussing this partnership, we assessed our capacity to receive migrants. And we know that we have a capacity in place to receive migrants, but we'll be also investing in new infrastructures going forward. And we are looking at shelters, but we are also looking at investing in social infrastructures for this program to take place. We're looking at investing in education, we're looking at investing in housing for the migrants, but also for our own people. So we have been working on all aspects of the program, including the infrastructure program. We are ready, and going forward, we're going to keep investing with the support of the UK to have the capacity we need to receive the migrants.
Murakoze. Nitwa Jean Pierre Kagabo nkorera RBA, Minisitiri w'Ububanyi n'Amahanga w'u Rwanda. I will speak in Kinyarwanda. Minisitiri, nashaka kubabaza mwavuze amateka yihariye y'u Rwanda, ibibazo rwaciyemo, ndetse kenshi na kenshi u Rwanda rugaragaza naho ruhagaze ku bibazo by'abashaka ubuhungiro, cyane cyane ku mugabane wa Afurika. Twagira ngo mubwire abanyarwanda neza inyungu bafite mu kuba musinya amasezerano y'ubufatanye n'Ubwongereza, amasezerano yo kwakira abantu wenda babimpunzi cyangwa se abimukira, ariko n'uburyo umuryango nyarwanda wateguye kubana n'aba bantu. Murakoze.
Murakoze. Ngira ngo murabizi ko hari ikibazo gisanzwe kiriho kijyanye n'abimukira banyura mu nzira zitemewe, benshi bakagenda banyuze mu nzira z'abacuruza bashaka inyungu zabo. Ni babandi mujya mwumva bapfiriye mu nyanja bashaka kwambuka, abandi ugasanga bari mu bigo ahantu ibihugu bidashobora kubakira, kandi ubona ahejo habo hatagaragara neza. U Rwanda rero dushingiye ku mateka yacu, nabivuze, igihugu cyacu kigizwe n'abantu benshi banyuze muri ubu buzima bw'impunzi, bagize igihe batari bafite igihugu kibemera. Kandi mu mateka yacu nanone twakiriye impunzi nyinshi mu bihe bitandukanye. N'uyu munsi dufite impunzi zigera ku 130 zituruka muri Kongo, zimwe zindi Burundi, ndetse dufite n'abaturutse.
We are listening to the Rwandan Foreign Minister and alongside the British Home Secretary Priti Patel. Vincent Baruta is currently speaking in Rwanda. We'll dip back in when the questions and answers come back to English. Just to sum up some of the headlines that have come out of this press conference so far is that Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, saying that she thinks the Nationality and Borders Bill will become law soon. Of course, that is required in order to put in action this new plan from the government. Said there that the plan is to resettle illegal migrants into the UK to Rwanda and start a new life there. The implication I took from that was it would be permanent resettlement, not a temporary period in Rwanda, saying that the UK is making investments in Rwanda, that this is a partnership. It involves economic development, not just to solve the migrant crisis. And also, in an answer to a question to Sky's Shingi Mararike about whether or not the responsibility for observing of human rights of these people that will be resettled to Rwanda and who that would lay with. We didn't get a clear answer on that. Talked about this being very much a partnership, not a one-sided deal, saying that the Australian situation, who have enacted something like this in the past, was not comparable, that they're keen to have the right processes in place with checks and balances, and mentioned in her answer national and international law, but did not outright answer the question from Shingi as to whether or not the responsibility for those migrants, once they're in Rwanda, would be on the UK or on Rwanda, saying that this is not a single simple solution to the migrant crisis that many countries face, and the UK is doing something new, something fresh, and wants to put the evil people smugglers out of business, calling that a moral imperative. Of course, we did hear from Prime Minister Boris Johnson earlier in the day as he outlined this process, also mentioned that the responsibility, operational command in the English Channel immediately would shift from the Border Force to the Royal Navy, whereas the rest of these announcements will require the Nationality and Borders Bill to pass. And Boris Johnson saying that he didn't think that would happen overnight. He said that it would be challenged in the courts. He expected that. He knows the system will not take effect immediately, but he's prepared to do whatever it takes, take the necessary legal reforms in order to deliver it. There is on the screen Vincent Biruta, the Rwandan's foreign minister, still been talking in Rwanda. Let's just have a little listen and see if we get a question and an answer now in English.
Chloe Chaplin from the I newspaper. Home Secretary, the Home Office has said that the first people in the UK will be notified of their relocation within a matter of weeks and flown in a matter of months. But we understand that the Rwandan government is still in negotiations over the lease of the first accommodation. So what is a realistic timeline for when the first people will arrive? And how many people are you expecting to be relocated by the end of the year? And Foreign Minister, will you be accepting claims from people who present directly to Rwanda and not via the UK? Thank you.
Chloe, thank you. First of all, I'm not going to get into details of numbers. You've heard me say, I think probably over the last 2 years as Home Secretary, that removing people from the UK with no legal basis to be in the UK is difficult and it is hard. And I have to say, I'm sure that there are many of you in this room that have written about some of the legal cases and things of that nature and some of the barriers that we face. But don't forget as well, that's why we have the new plan for immigration, the Nationality and Borders Bill. We are ready to operationalise, and that's incredibly important. I do want to emphasise that. That is the nature of our partnership. So our teams have been coming here for months and months and months, not just to negotiate, but to look at how we can operationalise this partnership. And of course, that covers resettlement, accommodation, the practicalities, meeting people's care needs, legal needs, etc., etc. We have a plan, a joint plan together to do that. And you've asked about the accommodation facilities here and leases. I mean, obviously that is for the government here. But we know through the work that our technical teams have been doing week after week, and even over the days that we've been here as well, and I had a team prior to my arrival here as well, we've all been working through the specific details of removals and also where the first arrivals will go to.
On the second question, this program will be dedicated to asylum seekers who are already in the UK. For other people who want to come to Rwanda to seek asylum or who want to be refugees in this country, there are existing channels, and those ones will be used. And the government of Rwanda will use the existing programs to address that aspect. So direct flights for people who want to come here and benefit from this program, it won't work. It is addressing people who are seeking asylum from the UK and who are already in the UK. For others, there are existing mechanisms which will be used, and they have been used in the past. They are still being used today. Thank you.
Mariam Kone from TV5, just right here. My question is for you both. I'm wondering to know what's going to be the criteria you're going to use to select the migrant people that are going to reach in Rwanda, and of course, how many times they're going to stay in Rwanda.
Go ahead. Thank you, Minister. Thank you. So you've asked about eligibility and selection for people to come to Rwanda. We're very clear that everyone who enters the UK illegally will be considered for resettlement and being brought over to Rwanda. I'm not going to divulge specific criteria for a number of reasons, because quite frankly, we are trying to break the model of the people smuggling gangs who use a range of ways in which to provide facilitation to our country and then obviously provide legal challenges to us as well. But the vast majority, I think it's important to say this, of people that have been arriving to the UK via illegal means such as small boats, via the people smugglers, will obviously be considered to be relocated.
Maybe I can add that some of the criteria we'll be considering as government of Rwanda would be, let's say, criminal records, for example, and we would prefer not to receive people from neighboring countries, immediate neighbors, like DRC, like Burundi, Uganda, or Tanzania, but those are just some. But there will be a system in place to screen all those who would wish to come here, or those who have been identified as people likely to benefit from this program. So we have a team in place, and we need to go through the files and set a number of criteria, and we'll keep working with the UK government on this. Thank you.
Shihab Khan, ITV News. Home Secretary, some of these asylum seekers will have family in the United Kingdom and will end up thousands of miles away at a country which was not of their choosing. Why do you think that those asylum seekers are better off in Rwanda than in the United Kingdom? And a second question, if I may. If a Ukrainian refugee were to arrive via an unofficial route, if they were to get on a boat across the channel, would they be eligible to be sent to Rwanda? And another question to you, Minister Baruta. Britain is essentially saying that these asylum seekers are not welcome, but you are willing to take them. Why are these asylum seekers welcome in Rwanda and not in the UK? What is the difference?
So, Shihab, thank you for your question. And first of all, let me just differentiate between those who are admissible and inadmissible to the asylum system. I think it's fair to say, we've spoken about this many times, you've heard me repeatedly speak about differentiation in terms of who will have access to our asylum system and who will not. Those that will have access to the asylum system under the new plan for immigration, all our work in government, and you heard the Prime Minister say this morning, will be those coming through safe and legal routes and obviously those fleeing persecution, oppression and tyranny. We've said that from day one. In fact, when I published the new plan for immigration last year, I was incredibly explicit about that. We are speaking specifically about those who are coming to our country through illegal means, small boats, for example, in refrigerated lorries, in the hands of people smugglers. We need to absolutely stop that from happening, and we have to stop this criminal trade. So differentiation is absolutely vital, and that is what we are speaking about through this partnership, Migration and Economic Development Partnership. It will be those individuals who are not admissible to the UK asylum system. And you've heard me speak frequently about parallel routes that are basically making our asylum system completely dysfunctional. The system is broken. It has no differentiation. And the people, those who pay the evil people smugglers get into the front of the queue, while we have people that are being left behind, women, children, families, that actually need our help and support. Your second question, you asked about Ukraine. Now, let me be clear, we have a safe and legal route for Ukrainian nationals seeking to come to the United Kingdom. There is no reason why anybody should come to the country via the people smugglers, and that is effectively the model that we want to break. We want to stop this vile trade, this inhumane trade, where criminal gangs and smugglers are just profiteering and making so much money and doing all sorts of inhumane things to people that are coming over in lorries and also in boats. You'll also know that with the Ukrainian scheme, over 50,000 visas have been granted. It is a safe and legal route. There are ways in which people can safely come to the United Kingdom, and that is an uncapped route. Let me remind you, it's an uncapped route. That's quite unprecedented. It's the first uncapped route of this kind set up by the British government.
Okay, the people we're talking here are illegal migrants. It is not about people choosing to stay here or to be maybe better off in one place or another. It is about illegal migrants. Those are stateless people who don't have any status in the UK, and we just decided to give our contribution to a solution to illegal migration. And we are going to provide these people with a minimum for them to be able to live a dignified life. We are going to invest in skill development. We're going to invest in socio-economic integration of these people. So some choose maybe to stay in the UK as he chose to cross the Europe to reach the UK. But what we are going to provide with them is just a dignified life with shelter, with skills for them to be able to socio-economically integrate our society, or to have those skills for them to be able to integrate in the country of origin when they decide to go back to their countries, or to relocate to another place which will be available to receive them. So that's what we're going to do. It is not about just anyone choosing to stay in determined countries. We're dealing with illegal migration. That's why we need to focus and to be able to give our contribution to the problem.
Thank you. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you.
The press conference there, just wrapping up between the Home Secretary Priti Patel and the Foreign Minister of Rwanda, Vincent Biruta. We heard some of the key headlines there coming out of it, including the fact that this is a partnership, in the words of the Home Secretary Priti Patel, and that those that are resettled to Rwanda will be given up to 5 years so that they can thrive with investment and funding and expertise coming from the UK side. And also that the Home Secretary felt that the Nationality and Borders Bill will become law soon. That is required for some of this to come into action. Prime Minister Boris Johnson saying earlier that he didn't think it would happen overnight. He did expect things to be challenged in the court, but he would do whatever it takes in order to deliver it. Lots to unpack from both that press conference and Boris Johnson's earlier. And we're joined by our political correspondent, Rob Powell, who's in Westminster, and Sky's Madeleine Ratcliffe, who's in Dover. And Rob, I'll come to you first of all in terms of, I think the key thing to come out of that press conference was in response to a question from our own Shingi